right. Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're blessed to have you. My name is Naomi Stewart. I'm one of the co-curators here at Inbreak for the 2021 cohort. And I'm just excited to have you. Tonight is our launch of the virtual exhibition for Into the Deep, Unto the New. And it's also housed under Dia Studios. I'd first just like to say a few thank yous. So thank you to Brianna Kinsman, who will be leading us tonight, guiding us through some activities. She's our director for liturgical expressions. Also, thank you to Dia Jenkins, our co-curator and director of Inbreak and the founder of Dia Studios, for both of you for your gifts in fostering and hosting a safe and brave space throughout the course of this residency, and just for continuously inspiring us and creating a vision as we reimagine social change as artists, leaders, and people. I also wanted to thank the artists who are all here tonight, and you'll get to hear from each and every one of them, who are also residents in the Inbreak residency: Liberty Wirth, Arneshia Williams, Andrew Nemmer, and Stephen A. Johnson. Thank you for your labor as leaders and artists, for being incredible makers and facilitators of change. And lastly, I want to thank each of you. Those of you who have taken the next hour and a half of your Saturday evening to immerse yourself in this space and to support Inbreak and our artists. Briefly about the Inbreak residency. It's an incubator for artists of any discipline: writers, curators, dancers, preachers. And it's meant to foster a brave space that facilitates a raw exploration of art, faith, and race in the United States. Over the course of the 3 months, the residents here featured in this exhibition engaged with text, open dialogue, and somatic practice to metabolize themes surrounding racial trauma in the United States. Each resident was encouraged to reimagine their individual role as artists and to enact solutions geared towards generating social healing through self-led community projects using their practice and tools provided by the Inbreak residency. And so what sort of spurred the residency and what inspired the founder, Dia, were the events that took place last year, May 25th. The killing of George Floyd became the springboard for this residency and for the first cohort. We witnessed his tragic killing in Minneapolis, Minnesota, while being arrested for allegedly using a counterfeit bill on this day. Society witnessed this tragic murder at the hands of the Minneapolis police, leading to worldwide protests calling for racial justice, for a recognition of the dignity and value of Black life. The growing political tension, exacerbated racial disunity, and division in the United States, Black and Indigenous people were again reminded that they must convince the world of their existence and of their value. During the breadth of the Inbreak residency in 2021, we examined this degradation of the value of BIPOC life, beginning with Dr. Willie Jennings' book, The Christian Imagination. In his text, Jennings states concepts of value and intimacy have been imagined by Western, traditionally white and male identities. But at another level, these are ways of being in the world that resist the realities of submission, desire, and transformation. Dr. Jennings goes on to say that the intimacy that marks Christian history is a painful one in which the joining often meant oppression, violence, and death. If not death of bodies, then most certainly death of the ways of life, forms of language, and visions of the world. And we see this degradation of body, culture, language, and vision is realized in embodied and intergenerational racialized trauma, deeply marking place and person. We asked as a cohort for Inbreak, how do we heal racialized trauma? And what can a post-racialized society look like? In Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, he states that in today's America, we tend to think of healing as something that is a binary. Either we're broken or we're healed from that brokenness. But he says that that's not how healing operates. And it's almost never how human growth works. More often, healing and growth take place on a continuum with innumerable points between utter brokenness and total health. And we believe, and we've come to realize as a cohort and artists, and you'll see in their works, that along this continuum is where we can start to imagine what healing can be. Into the Deep and Unto the New is an interactive virtual exhibition that navigates this continuum of collective healing. More than an exhibition, Into the Deep, Unto the New is the full expression of real people who happen to be artists, grappling with personal and collective trauma that racial division and on a social and systemic level impacts us. A virtual showcase by residents Liberty Wirth, Steve Johnson, Arneshia Williams, and Andrew Nemmer, Into the Deep, Unto the New provides a lens through which we see the impassioned overflow from art as practice to art as community building in an effort to bravely uncover racialized trauma and to thus reimagine a post-racial society. In this exhibition, we have the website at inbreak.co, which we'll share links to, and you can see on our Instagram, that will have a further deep dive into the artists and their works and the participants. But then also we have an interactive virtual space, which you'll be introduced to tonight on Miro. And you'll see the drawings, quilts, spoken, written storytelling, tap performance, embodied movement, performance, and video from all of the Inbreak residents and their participating community members. And so I want to go ahead and pass it off to Brianna Kinsman to guide us through our check-in.
Thank you, Naomi. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this exhibition opening of Into the Deep, Unto the New. The way that we're going to start off our time together is the way that we've started off our time together for our residency gatherings. For each of our gatherings over a course of 12 weeks, we would begin by doing a short check-in. And this would be a way of sort of marking our transition from one part of the day to another, but also from individual lives to collective gathering. And it was an intentional practice of tuning into the body, tuning into the breath, and noticing what we were feeling that day and sharing it with one another. So we're going to do a couple things. We'll do a check-in all together, check in with our emotions, how are we feeling today, check in with our bodies, how are our bodies feeling today, and then we will do a short breath meditation together. We're going to do part of this on a software called Miro. We're going to use Miro at 2 different times today. Once here, this will kind of be our practice round. And then at the end of our time, we'll have a group designing different futures activity that we'll all do together. Miro does work best on a laptop. So if you have the ability to get onto a laptop to use this software, that would be best. If not, no worries. We'll also have options for you to send in your responses in the chat. So I'm going to share my screen and just give you a quick rundown of how Miro is going to work. All right. So when you log on, you might see it zoomed out all the way like this. So this is our Miro version of our gallery. So when you first come on, there are 3 things to do. First, make sure that this little arrow in the top menu is highlighted blue. That's just going to allow you to see where everyone's moving on the board. If you don't like that, you can always turn it off and you'll only see your cursor. So make sure you can see your collaborators' cursors. Second step is going to be come to the settings and make sure your navigation mode is set to either mouse or trackpad, depending on which one you're using. So if you have a trackpad like on a laptop, you'll make sure that trackpad is selected, hit apply. And if you're using a mouse, you'll make sure mouse is selected and hit apply. And you can see directions here of how to use your mouse. If you're on a mouse, you'll move the scrolling wheel back and forth to zoom in and out of the canvas, and then click and drag to move yourself around the canvas. For trackpad, it's like on a phone. So you'll pinch out to zoom in, pinch fingers together to zoom out, and then scroll the board in any direction by sliding 2 fingers on the trackpad. So step 1, make sure you can see everyone's cursors. Step 2, you'll come to settings, navigation mode, select your navigation mode. All right, and then the last thing is when you come on, you might see your cursor looks like a hand. Now that works just fine if you like it. It'll sort of grab and move the screen around. I found that it's much easier to select objects, which is something we'll be doing with the cursor arrow. So in the left-hand menu, you'll select this top option and make sure that your cursor appears as an arrow. Next, when you guys come on, I'll bring you all to this board. This is what we'll focus on first. And there are 2 questions for you to answer. How are you feeling today? And some shapes. You can select which one you relate to most. And we'll do a group survey by clicking a dot and dragging it under the shape that you relate to. And same for the second question. How does your body feel today? There are some different shapes here. Choose one that you relate to. So you'll click once, you'll see a dot is highlighted. And then drag it to whichever shape you're feeling today. All right, so I think some people are already on here. If you haven't already, click the link that's in the chat, and that'll bring you over to Miro. And if you are not able to get on a laptop, because Miro works best on a laptop for this, you can also answer these questions in the chat. So how are you feeling today? And then how is your body feeling today? And time's up. Okay, so that was sort of our first introduction to Miro, and we'll come back and use Miro again, keep exploring it at the end. So now I invite everyone to come back to your Zoom page and start to settle in. We'll do just a moment of breathing and guided meditation. So wherever you are right now, if you're in the car, if you're at your home, on your couch, on your bed, I invite you to make sure that both your feet are connected to the ground, and that your back is nicely supported by your chair, by the wall. Blink the eyes closed. And breathe out any stale air. And just begin to notice the breath as it fills your lungs, expands in the body, and as it releases. Bringing your entire self into this moment with all that you're feeling, with all that your body's carrying. See if you can invite that to be a part of this day, a part of this moment. Relax the space between the eyes. Relax the space behind the ears. Relax your jaw, the tongue. Bring stillness to the shoulders, the throat. And sink down into your chair, feeling the place where your seat rises to meet your legs, to meet your back, to support you. Relax your body. Slowing down, entering in. We're going to take a couple rounds of guided breath using a technique called square breathing. So it'll be 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 4 counts out, 4 counts held. I'll lead us through. So again, breathe out any stale air, and we'll breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Last time, 2, 3, 4. You'll hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe at your own pace. Take a moment to pause. Enjoy this moment. A little bit of silence. Connecting to the breath, the body. And before we move on, notice again, how are you feeling now? If it didn't change, that's okay. But does the body feel anything different? Did any emotions arise? And try to take an objective look at this. Just notice what's going on without judgment or meaning making. Just accept. This is what I'm feeling now. One more deep inhale in and blow it out. Blink the eyes open. Don't look at the screen yet, but look off screen. Take in the space around you. Looking all the way around. And when you're ready, come back to the group and we'll continue on. Thank you all for taking time to check in and enter in with us. And I'll pass it back to Naomi for our artist panel.
Thank you so much, Bree. For those you don't know, but Bree led us through these check-ins for each of our gatherings throughout the residency process. And so just forever thankful getting these opportunities to really center. At this time, I wanted to introduce to you each of our artists, panelists who are here. I'll introduce each individually and then I'll ask a couple of questions that each of you will be able to respond to. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. All right, so first up, I wanted to introduce Liberty Wirth. She's a native of Los Angeles, influenced by the power of art and nature to soothe trauma and bring peace. Her work that she creates reflects a natural wonder and quiet beauty from both new and discarded or repurposed materials. Her project that she's presenting here today or throughout the exhibition is Where We Have Been and Where We Hope to Be. It started from a series of quilts created as a meditation on grief, hopes, and history in response to the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent protests in 2020. She constructs these quilts using scraps from African fabrics from her travels in simple blocks, and she also extended this practice, creating a series of videos and materials from her own work and some of the materials offered through Inbreak. She pitched it to a small, diverse group of friends and colleagues. The participants then created works of their own. Each went through the steps of learning the materials, mapping their heritage, honoring their grief, and investigating hope. Digital artists turned the project digital, writers wrote profound statements, and visual artists pushed the boundaries. This is their work that you'll see here. On the mural platform, you'll see just a select few that Liberty actually collaborated with, turning the digital works back into quilts, and you'll be able to read their stories. But on her Instagram, Have Been and Hope to Be is where you'll see the complete and ever-growing list of people interacting with this project and sharing their stories. So thank you, Liberty, for being here. Next up, oh yes, thank you. Next up is Stephen A. Johnson. Based in New York, Stephen draws intimate scenes in an effort to reframe the way we talk about Blackness through strokes of charcoal and graphite. They make Blackness and darkness the protagonists. In this manner, shifting the paradigm which considers whiteness, light, the dominant formal aspect across paper. Working from memory, interviews, verbal histories, and family keepsakes, Stephen navigates a cross-generational, cross-cultural, and cross-diasporic hypothesis of what they would say to be a biological child of his, unbesmirched by the colonized imagination. Some of the materials in his work are fragmented or damaged, told secondhand, or else gleaned from painful memories half remembered. Others are passed down by elders to metabolize inherited trauma. They then transmorgify these artifacts into a visual love letter called Dear Beautiful Black Baby to possible inheritors of that trauma. Channeling intergenerational resistance, wisdom, and resilience, Stephen's drawings and activities explore the counter-narrative necessary to eclipse the burden of inherited and bestowed trauma central to Black and othered bodies. In other words, his drawings transform histories, artifacts, spatially dependent histories, and biographical fragments into tactile, metabolic renderings of an inward reflective state. His project, Body and Language, he invites participants to journey and answer some of these questions through drawing. And he took us through that activity actually, and it was beautiful, but it really brought forth these different themes of intergenerational resistance, wisdom, resilience, and how that we can metabolize those traumas in our body. So thank you, Stephen, for being here tonight. Next up is Minnesota-based dancer, choreographer, artist, Arneshia. Arneshia Williams. She's a subtle weaver, mover, and space shifter who creates with an underlying purpose of sharing experiences that help uplift, foster collaboration, and reframe the culture of today. Her artwork is a snapshot into the social, cultural, and spiritual dimensions of life that explores contemporary relationships through performance. Seasoned Right Here's, or Here, is a come as you are, glad, angry, tired, or well-rested space that reveals subtle layers of togetherness and we-ness as her participants, who are also artists, fellowship with one another. This space was created for participants to chill, give support to each other, and center their voices, which I think is so needed. The voices of self-identifying Black, Indigenous, people of color community members. The Seasoned Right Here video features the responses of participants to this project through voice, dance, and music composition. Thank you, Arneshia, for joining us. Last but not least, Andrew Nemmer. Andrew Nemmer is based in Idaho and is a professional tap dancer, teacher, and artist. His practice often begins with a question. The question that drove his project for Inbreak was, how did the world we're in develop into what it is now in the first place? He wanted to find out how to think about how we got to where we are before thinking about how we start trying to get to anywhere else. His project, What We Leave Behind, let me change my slide. I realized, okay. His project, What We Leave Behind, is a showcase of an improvisational tap performance that tracks the smallest unit of creation, individual choice, by an individual dancer, mainly Andrew. When dealing with a group, the combined choices by all the dancers create the piece the audience ultimately sees. In improvisational performances with one or more dancers, their choices are not planned out and memorized ahead of time. The dancers pass training, individual preferences, and ultimately their character fuels the choice they make in the moment. They can almost trust one another to make certain choices because of the kind of dancer they are. In this work, What We Leave Behind, Andrew navigates the relationship between choice and impact. What that is key when thinking about what we leave behind. Unpacking the processes of choice making, the uncovering of impact, and the relationship between the two is the heart of this project. Believing that if we change what we leave behind, then and only then can the world change, or can we start to imagine the world changing? So thank you, Andrew, thank you, artists, for joining. I'll now pose just a couple of questions. It's so great to see you all. I feel like it's been, I don't know, a few weeks since we last saw each other. But I'll kind of leave this open-ended, starting with the first question, and just unmute once you feel ready to answer. So the first question: what are the wounds recognized in this process individually or in your community, or what were the wounds, are the wounds that informed your work and your projects, and how have you coped with or started to heal these wounds? So I'll open that up to anyone who wants to answer. Stephen, always ready and willing. Go ahead, Steve. Or Arneshia.
Arneshia unmuted first. I'm just gonna let God work through Arneshia. So.
We're gonna work together because teamwork makes the dream work. All right. So you all just pop on in. So I had to write this stuff down. I was like, y'all always posing these wonderful deep questions. So I was thinking about some of our discussions from my project in the wonderful community. And I was like, I just started jotting things down. So this was all self-identified Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And so just thinking about some of the wounds or some of the conversational pieces we were working through, some of it was about just being seen and voices being heard, right? Because sometimes, you know, we're like, hey, what's going on? But we don't really want to hear it, or we don't really want to connect to what it means, right, to change or to shift. So I think those are some of the wounds, if you will, that we were working through. Just being heard and knowing that that's all good. Like, whatever you got to say, we're here for it. Let's go.
I think for me and my working community, the biggest question that kept getting brought up, what is safety, and what does it mean to be grounded, and not what that means just on a instantaneous scale, meaning like me, my brother, sister, my family. It expands. I think one of the most common sort of question or answers to the question of God was like, what is your ancestors' wildest dream? Or what do you envision? Like, what is your wildest dream in the concern for you? Is the most common response that I got is I just want my family to be safe and to be grounded. And what does that mean? And I think that it wasn't really something that was in the forefront of my mind, even up until maybe about 3 to 4 hours ago. Having read the questions, like, oh, I got these really great responses, but then I'm listening through the interviews that I did, and just that having that sacred owning, like, in the American sense, it's owning property. But what does that mean? You know, that same dream of being grounded in safety 2 generations back, or even a generation back in some cases, or people who are first or second generation immigrants. Like, what does that mean expounded upon, like, where you're coming from? Does that mean that's like fresh water, or does that mean that that's accessible transit for your family to get to work so they can provide for themselves? And that question of what that big umbrella question of what is safety and what is to be grounded is the wound that prevails most.
That's a really powerful question. Makes me want to try and figure out the answer for myself, being a Generation Zero cat. I think in the community that I've been working with, the members who jumped on board for the pilot course of What We Leave Behind are like all over the world. We have people from Poland, there are cats in Hawaii that are journeying with us. And one of the things that keeps coming up for us in the feedback that we have is this idea of like the multitude of choices that are available, and how much of the process of choice making and potentially impact is hidden from us at times, and that it takes a work to get in there and actually kind of pick away at what's going on, and sometimes what we find we don't necessarily like, and I think that wall has been one that a few of us have kind of been looking at and trying to wrestle with.
I think for me and my group, what we recognized, I think one of the biggest things that comes out of it is that trying to define what hope looks like. I mean, this overarching question of like, what does a post-racialized society look like? That was like such a big question. I don't know if I ever got there, right? Because I think like I named mine where we have been and where we hope to be, but I think very few of us found the ability to fully process what hope looks like getting past where we are right now, because we still have to deal with the stuff that we are in, and all of us, including whatever race we are. I had a really diverse group too, but we all carry the scars of it. And I think that the biggest unanswered question, which I was actually looking even today, that two of my people, their final project, which was hope, actually created question marks. And I was like, oh, I think that a lot of us are there. And I realized I haven't even gotten to that place in my pieces. Like I haven't even gotten to the hope place yet. I'm still trying to process what that looks like. So that I think is the biggest one right now, is trying to define what hope looks like. That I think is a wound that, but in my opinion, we have to look backwards in order to get to that place.
If I can tack on to that, Liberty, I think also to another dimension in my working groups is that the question of a post-racialized society was met with three very distinct emotions in different proportions for a lot of people. It was disbelief that it could ever happen, outright hostility, and then this sort of quasi sort of blankness where like even the thought or the audacity to even conceive of that reality was just so out of the realm of possibility that a lot of people's brains just stopped. And in the editing process of a lot of these, I think I've done maybe about 12 interviews so far. And some of them I can't share because of just how raw the nature of some of these answers are. But just the most common response is just like, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? And across generational spans, I think the oldest participant that I've had is 60 something. So I'm 28. My youngest participant is in their 30s. And across that 30-year span, there was just such a either a sort of arresting sort of like apathy that comes along with that, sort of just putting your brain in that space is just so hard that we just kind of give up. Or there's just like you have enough energy to be too angry to even one of my participants, Robin, who came to one of our other activities, said that, now it just sticks with me, is that she would be openly what is the word, I guess like in shock, like she wouldn't be able to believe it, like if she woke up one day and like we had arrived at a post-racialized society, she would feel some type of way that first hour of the day, just be like, this can't be true, this can't be it. And then would have to like check the news cycle several times, call a few people, and then maybe she could start to believe that like something like this we have arrived. And I think some of that is just ingrained in us, and sort of that remembered history and that inherited trauma, to go, how many generations with the deferral of this dream, and then to finally one day be like, poof, it's here. Like, what does that do? What does that do to a person? So yeah, like, are we at the point where we can hope about that yet? Can we get to the point where our imaginations are open enough that we can conceive that yet? I don't know. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, definitely echoing Stephen and even Liberty, kind of what we came to conclude, because I think the original question was, okay, how are we going to dream or reimagine a future? We were toying with the different titles, and that was something that came up, realizing that the scar is fresh and is continuously being reopened for many, especially even in the last couple of months with Makia Bryan and Dante Wright and so many others. And just thinking about what can healing look like. I remember, Stephen, too, Andre's interview, which we did feature an excerpt in tonight's exhibition, but he had a quite disbelief too in, okay, post-racialized society, what is that? What is racialized? There was this balance of being you and being a human, but also accepting the differences and finding that balance. So I feel that it does start with us on many levels, and I've seen that in each of your projects, just that care and that patience with oneself and with one's own journey, and mapping that out before we can even move forward, right? So that brings me to the next question, and the one that we've all been sort of wrestling with, and it will continue to wrestle with tonight and on. But what do you believe, now that we've talked about this for 3 months, what do you believe needs to be redesigned? Where do we start? And what do you envision when you're thinking of a post-racialized society?
Here we go again. No. What needs to be redesigned? Humanity? Yeah, I'm gonna say humanity. I'm gonna say how we perceive and think about and grasp it with power, and what it means to be human, and what it means to be in relationship with each other. From the relationships that you see every day when you wake up in the morning, if you got a significant somebody or something, to the relationships, like when we're passing each other when we walk. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna say to this wonderfully large question.
I guess we found our order. I think it starts with teaching people how to harness their imagination. I think one of the things that when talking to artists and people who are abundant in imagination, the act of envisioning a better world is infinitely easier because you're already there. You already have the capability to reach outside of yourself and outside of your mind and grasp this idea of what could be. But then when we, in a imaginative world, or speaking to people who don't envision and conjure things into the world on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis, like all of us do, it sometimes can be very hard. When I talking to my brother, who is a numbers person. And like, yes, he's like really, he works in menswear, he does all these, he's a very creative person, but he's not an imaginative person. And talking to him about what a post-racialized society to him is numbers. It's all about distribution. It's all about logistics. It's all about, but he can't go past that mechanism of how he sees the world. He doesn't have the imagination. He's just not equipped see it. And I even see this with some people that I've interviewed that are half and half, who I had a former student of mine who I interviewed who's in tech but also makes film. And for her, a post-racialized society is just being able to like put that on a screen. But then also there's a very sort of intense negotiation of like, well, I even have problems putting things on screens because cameras are not made to calibrate darker skin tones. So there's like all these stumbling blocks to the way that we can imagine. And if you can imagine the thing, you can envision it. And if you can envision it, you can have faith. And then if you can have faith in the thing, you can do works to make it happen. And that's just a very roundabout way to say that, like, with imagination, we can have faith and we can actually make the work live if we can dream it, if that's within your capability to see that's not, but what is not possible. So yeah, teaching people how to harvest that imagination, that imaginative quality. Like, what is wonder again? We teach people how to, like, these are the only things that like math, science, athletics are the only things that you can have to pull yourself into this new echelon, this new whatever, a better life or better whatever. And we tell people not, we dare tell them not to dream, because if they start to dream, they start to realize how messed up the world is. But you can see that better in your mind, you can act upon it. And yeah, teaching people to imagine again, or teaching people that imagination is not bad, that daydreaming is wonderful, that dreaming, as William Jennings says, is a sacred duty. Like let people dream, and then we can have a better world because they can see it. And if they can see it, they can act on it. But if they can't see it, it's just not real to them. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to echo that. One of the things that we dive into in the course is a framework for transformation that Dallas Willard presents. This basically lines up vision, intention, and means as kind of the three things that you need for any kind of transformation. And I pitch the two examples as like trying to learn a new language and the proposition of the kingdom of heaven as two visions that will function in the same framework. And you need that framework to move into accepting the possibility of those two things. So I think for me, in terms of kind of moving forward, it is that idea of learning to dream again, but also like interrogating what it is about the way I think about things so that my thinking is continually sharpened and is moving me in a direction so that my vision of whatever future I'm thinking of is also the one that is actually good, and not just a function of habitual thinking or things that have affected me as I've grown.
In this group, I'm the only one who's a mother, and I've brought it up a number of times that sometimes I feel like my best gift is just to simplify things down to preschool level. And I think that for me, it's about teaching the next generation and ourselves in that, along with that, how to see one another and how to hear one another, and growing in that. And like all of the above, the imagination, the dreaming, like everything you guys said is so beautiful. And the way I see it kind of pouring through me is this just the sense of like trying to bring that into a daily life of like seeing each person individually, and hopefully using my voice to let others be seen as well. So that's that's about as that's really simple, but that's the way I think. And I, like I said, I have like this bring it down to a preschool level aspect to me. So.
Thank you. Yes, it is such a nebulous question and one we continue to wrestle with. So thank you all for sharing, and even in seeing your projects and reflecting on the themes we spoke about throughout the 12 weeks. For me, like what I'm feeling in my body and what I've been yearning for is just this freedom to just exist and just to be valued and seen, to play and to rest, and finding space to do that. I remember Andrew, I think it's one of your quotes, maybe we have it up, I'm not sure. You know, how can we possibly metabolize hundreds of years of painful history? Of course, it's good to know, it's good to be aware so we don't repeat it. But also it's, you know, is our role to bear the burden of that painful past, or is it to recognize and do better and move forward and to be the change we want to see? Kind of cliche, but that's basically what it is. So my last question, we have a few minutes, maybe one or two, or if you can keep it brief, your response. What is your role, or what do you see the role of artists being, artists, creators, and art as a whole, being in addressing these wounds and in this redesign? As brief as you can, if each of you want to respond to that question.
I see, so every artist has whatever role they will define for themselves. And I see mine as being a person who's gonna keep it real, be down to earth with the thing, and make room for the conversations and the movements that we want to do in order to make what we want to make, and or what we need, because it's not just what we want, it's what we need. It's what we all need, whether we think it or not. Okay.
I think, okay, well, in general, I feel like we have, as artists, and like some, I know some people who will definitely fight me on this, but have a slight responsibility to chronicle the sort of happenings in whatever way, shape, or form, keeping history in some shape so that we can preserve it for the next generation. And whether that, it doesn't have to be something that's literal, it doesn't have to be something that has to look like, it doesn't have to have morphish shape, it doesn't have to look like the literal, but in some ways, taking the attitudes and the thought process and the ideals and the strides and the progress that we make, and somehow making that physical in whatever way, manner, shape, form that we can, so that those who come after us can pick up the banner and take it those 2, 3, 4 steps forward. For me, that has started to manifest in like the weirdest way possible. Is that I felt like I've become in some ways a lore keeper for a number of these experiences that I've been sort of not inheriting, but sort of collecting, or that are being lent to me with consent. And over time, there's this sort of connective map. I leave something with the person that I interact with, and they give me something. And through time, this tapestry is woven of interconnectivity, of sharing the burden of, like, it really kind of sucks to be this aware and to know that we have to carry this burden of this trauma, or our bodies have carried the burden of this trauma for so long. So, and weirdly enough, by giving giving each other a piece of this puzzle, it lightens the load quite a bit. I always feel enriched, and I always feel poured into, and that makes my load so much easier to bear. Maybe just for a half hour or maybe like 15, 20 minutes, or maybe 2 to 3 days, but the load becomes lighter by sharing the load. Two oxen yoked together can do so much more than the one by itself. And by continuously not yoking ourselves in a negative way, but binding ourselves together to one another and relying on each other, we make the load, the burden of this burden of having to live in the world that we live in now a lot easier by sharing. Yeah.
I'll jump in here, but I would like Liberty to actually say what she said in the chat, so it's recorded on this. So I'll be really quick. Yes, and I think at least in my practice as being a tap dancer, one of the things I feel like I have a responsibility for is to engage everybody's imagination. Chuck Green, who's an older tap dancer, used to say, we make other people's imagination into a reality as tap dancers, because what we do is something that people don't believe is real in a certain way. And so there's a responsibility to then further engage that activity in other spheres of life. So it's not just in the, wow, that's a really cool thing that you do. I can't believe that that's actually a thing that happens and people can do that. And it's, you know, that kind of thing. But where else in life are we seeing things or not seeing things that are actually possible? And how can we spur on that conversation?
Thank you, Andrew. That's kind. I just had wanted to say that I think that my role is to use my space to create space for more, to make the trail wider and uplift others, because I believe there's plenty of room. I live by this quote, which I actually wrote it wrong in the chat, so I'll read it correctly, which is, talent is always conscious of its own abundance and does not object to sharing. That's by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I just think that if we live by that and that generosity, I think there would be a lot more hope for all of us.
Thank you so much, artists, for your beautiful responses. I'm so grateful for each of your work, for your gifting of your time, your space, and your brilliant minds to these questions that we're holding. And so, friends, we're going to hold these questions together. We're going to invite you to step into these questions as well with us. These questions that the artist responded to, we'll have an opportunity now to respond to them as a group. Willie Jennings says that dreaming is a sacred duty. It is the womb of the kind of thinking that moves us toward life. And so this idea of dreaming as something sacred, as a duty, as a role, was one that we held together in considering our role as artists in our various communities and in our mission toward collective healing and social change. If dreaming is a sacred duty, what does that inspire us to do? What possibilities does that then open? How does that inspire us to be in our communities and to work with our communities? One of the major keystones of this residency is the necessity of the work of the collective and of the community in order to bring about what we imagine is possible. And so today we invite all of you to be a working community together and to consider this question, what can a post-racialized society look like? So let me share my screen here and I'll just show you what you'll be doing. All right. So this will be the two boards that we're working on. You'll see several templates on your right, and each of these are labeled breakout room 1, 2, so you'll be working on the one that corresponds with whatever breakout room you're in. Come over to the left and you have your instructions. So we'll come into breakout rooms and we'll consider this question, what can a post-racialized society look like, with your breakout group by discussing the questions below and then designing your ideas on one of the blank boards on the right. You can do this by using text, you can use images, color, work together to describe what needs to be resigned in your communities and contexts, and your designs for a different future. So we have 2 questions to consider. In the first group of questions, what are the wounds and what needs to be redesigned? And those correspond to this first box here. And then secondly, what do we envision? What can a post-racialized society look like? That will correspond to the second box. So have your facilitator lead you through these questions. Take a few minutes to brainstorm and talk about your ideas together first as you go through these questions, and then record them by placing your group's responses and ideas on the squares that correspond with each. There is a little quick how-to for uploading images, how to type using stickies if you need a reminder, and I'll go ahead and explain that now. So I'm going to come down here and use this board. So again, all of these are able to be moved and designed however you want. You do not have to stay in the lines. In fact, we encourage you to break out of them. So you can move these elements around if you'd like. This box can be made larger or smaller. Click once near the edge and you have options for colors. Okay, so to use text, you'll come over here to your left-hand menu, click the T, and then click anywhere on the board. And it might be small like that, just zoom in. Or you can always make it larger with your font size here. And if you want to just use text, that's fine. You can type your group's thoughts out. So text button here, click anywhere, start typing. You can also change the font, change the color. You can change the background color. So many options. Second, sticky notes. You can access sticky notes by the sticky option and then tapping once to stick it to your board. You can make it larger or smaller by tapping once and then using the toggle functions, and you'll double click to start typing. You can make more stickies by copy and pasting, so that's Control C, Control V, or if you come over to the 3 dots here, oops, here we go. To the 3 dots, you'll see copy, and then you'll have a paste option when you right click. We also have sticky notes on the right side of each column, so you can do the same by clicking and dragging it to your board. Okay, and the last thing I just wanted to show you is if you would like to add images, like say you had an art piece that reminds you or that corresponds with one of your ideas or responses, or you're having an idea and it's just described better through an image, you can upload images by using the upload button. And you can upload from your device, or if you come down to the 3 dots on the left-hand menu, you can also directly Google search. So no pressure to make this, your masterpiece or to even finish all of the questions. The main point is just to imagine, to dream together what's possible.
I know we're almost at time. I wanted to give everyone the opportunity to really think through and talk. These boards will be here for you. You can create your own individual or go back to your group board to really play, to really think through and take away these ideas, what needs to be redesigned, what do we envision, and sharing that and going forward with those visions. So Bree, I don't know if you had more to say about that before we transition, but thank you all for taking part in that discussion.
Friends, as a way to close our time, we'll take a moment to return to the breath, and I invite you to receive these words of benediction. Let's come back to the breath, coming back to the body. As we exit, we'll begin as we entered. So allowing both feet to come to the floor. Blinking the eyes closed. Slowing down. Begin by blowing out any stale air. And inhale for 4 counts. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe at your own pace. And friends, you're invited to open your hands, palms facing up, to receive these words. You may keep the eyes closed or take a soft focus in front of you. As we go from here, I send you with this benediction. Benediction is to bless with word. And so, siblings, as we go from here, may we bless with more than word. May we go blessing and blessing and blessing this land and these streets and these communities with every part of us and every one of us as we go from here. May we go together and together and together into the deep, unto the new. Go in peace.